How are things going in your world today?
They're great.
Good.
Very enlightening.
Good.
So it's 3:45 and we still have people who are joining us. My name is Tabitha Summerlin. I just want to say thank you all for joining us for our conference and thank you all for joining us for this session. This session is called IT Governance. The speaker for today is Mr. Dwayne Campbell. First, I want to tell you about our sponsor. Our platinum sponsor for today is Avaya. As a global leader in delivering superior communication experiences, Avaya provides the most complete portfolio of software and services for multi-touch, contact center, UC, and multimedia solutions in the cloud, on-premise, or a hybrid of each. Their solutions leverage an open, extensive developmental platform, which allows customers to adapt to their technology by creating custom applications and automated workflows for their unique business needs and seamlessly integrate with Avaya's capabilities into existing infrastructure and business applications. Again, our speaker is Mr. Dwayne Campbell. Dwayne is the Chief Information Officer for the great city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he is responsible for managing information, technology, and innovation while ensuring the use of modern IT software and technologies to streamline business operations. He has over 30 years of experience in the area of IT governance, strategic planning, project management, customer relationship management, change management, budget development, business process engineering, IT training, RFP production, and software evaluation. Dwayne holds a bachelor's degree in management information systems from UNC Greensboro and a master's of business administration from Pfeiffer University, as well as a Six Sigma Green Belt certification and a North Carolina Chief Information Officer certification from UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. Dwayne lives by the following mottos: seek first to understand, then to be understood. If better is possible, then good is no longer an option. So our session today is called IT governance, and IT governance is the first predictor of value generated by IT. Yet many municipalities struggle to organize governance effectively. In this presentation, you'll learn how to align IT with business context, create a governance framework, implement a governance framework. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dwayne Campbell for him to facilitate our session.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tabitha, for that warm introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Just a quick thumbs up, maybe. All right. So we're talking about IT governance as a way to drive business results. So I know this is a technology conference, but we really want to be talking more about the business aspect of technology today and why it's so important. And it's going to be some inside baseball. I'm going to give you our journey into governance and what we did wrong and how I thought we were on the right track and why that's not working and now how we kind of resetting. So it's a little, we're exposing ourselves, so take it easy on us. We are a work in progress, all right? So again, I did this presentation, not this presentation, but a presentation on governance probably about a year and a half ago. And I do want to provide a level of a foundation as it relates to making sure that we all at a common place as it relates to what governance is, what's governance not, and how we can then move the organization forward. And that's when I'll get into some of the work that we've been doing as an organization, what worked well, what did not work well, okay? And again, you can stop me at any time asking questions. Interrupting me does not bother me. And Tabitha, I assume that you will manage that for me. Maybe. All right, so let's move into it. So IT governance, what is IT governance? I really like to focus in on or hone in on one or two areas here. One is an enabling framework for decision-making and project planning, and that keyword is planning there. But I like to, the second bullet there is where I really focus in on, and that is the business IT collaboration, those business units and IT. It's an opportunity for us to have a conversation, which is going to lead to greater consistency. And the word that I like to use a lot is transparency. What is it that the business is trying to accomplish and how do we help them? And we know that everything can't be a priority 1A, 1B. How do we then help the business outline what their priorities are. One of the things that we don't want to do, and governance is not, and I always caution against this, especially around, especially on the project management side, if you will, but governance is not a tool for the IT shop to say, hey, we can't make this happen, or we can't get that done, or a way for us to kind of kick the can down the road, or it's a one-time project that we must view. So it's not a management tool in that regard. That is not what governance is. Couple misconceptions, common misconceptions, if you will, about governance and the governance versus the management is governance sets the direction, again, through the prioritization and decision-making. And we're talking about decision-making from a set of standards, and as it relates to the overall performance of IT, how does IT align with the vision and mission of the respective organization? So how does it allow that organization to help them meet their goals and move further down the trail? You see that evaluate, direct, and monitor. That's a COBIT framework that is used, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And then this slide definitely shows how the difference between the governance and management. Again, management is, when you think about the management aspect of projects, you want to think about how do we execute? We've already decided what to do. We already know the priorities. Now, how do we execute on those? How do we operate those? And how do we monitor the success or the activities? That's the management piece. It's very easy, and we are a victim of this. It's very easy when you're talking about governance to fall into the management aspect of governance. I mean, excuse me, not of governance, but the management aspect of project planning, if you will. So what separates governance from IT management? Again, the governance committee, and that's, again, it's a committee, and it's not just the IT shop. Okay, it's not just your IT group that's on that governance committee. As a matter of fact, it's mostly made up of your business units. So they decide on which projects we're going to undertake, what those the resource allocation, what the budget is, not just the budget, but also capacity. One of the things that we didn't do well at one time was talk about the capacity of the organ, not of IT, but of the operational unit. So that's very important as well. Then again, what's the difference between the governance and the management? Management receives the list of projects which have already been prioritized, and now that's when you take it over to your PMO shop to then create a strategy to move that forward. So effective governance, again, is critical in driving business satisfaction. I pulled this directly, and you'll see a lot of the research is coming from Infotech. We use them quite a bit in helping us through our governance journey. What you find here is that 88% of CIOs believe that governance structure and the processes are not effective. And a lot of it is and it's some combination at any given time of making sure you have the right people, making the right decisions at the right time. And if any of those get out of alignment, then that's when you really can have a conflict with making sure that you understand or are driving business value. Again, the IT strategy and project portfolio management are critical to effective governance. But again, you got to have the governance, that priority and planning piece before you can have the project portfolio piece. And it is very important that it goes in that order. Again, these are foundational type conversation that most of you are probably aware of. I'm just providing a level of foundation before we move into our respective journey. Okay. Any questions at this time?
There are no questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. So a couple of success factors are centered around, again, a clear engagement model. Not only does the committee need to understand how they function individually, but more importantly, the overall enterprise thinking. And I call it the handshake, or my team often hears me refer to it as that handshake model, or upstream, downstream thinking, the handoffs. So we're really not just looking at it. The team members, the leaders on the governance committee should not just be looking at how do I move my project to the top of the list, but really be thinking about it from an enterprise perspective. And that is a paradigm shift for a lot of them, because typically directors go in and they're ready to fight for their respective projects. But when we take a step back and say, look, there needs to be an alignment of all of these projects from a city perspective, from a corporate perspective, that's when we begin to have that paradigm shift. Again, we want to make sure we have a structured agenda that helps move the meeting forward. Participation, that is very key. Participation is extremely key. A lot of directors, as you know, already have a full plate. So you really got to understand and make sure that you create quickly the value in participating in these meetings. And a lot of that is centered around making sure that you prepare ahead of time. One of the PMs that kind of sets the tone or set the meeting up, so we prepare probably 2 weeks in advance for our governance meetings. And we still have had times where at the last minute we are making changes, but that preparation is extremely key. Okay. This slide really focuses on making sure, and I've been talking about this ever since I've probably been in NCLGISA in this role, probably for the last 9 years, is understanding the difference between a strategic partner. And if I remember correctly, Shannon and I did a presentation in Charlotte one time on strategic partnership versus looking at IT being viewed as a utility or a cost center. And having that strategic conversation is extremely key in ensuring that. But as you can see, the numbers don't lie. If you look here, again, this research comes from Infotech, benchmarking, not benchmarking, but looking at several different industries. And this is not just municipalities, cities, and counties, but this is across all industries, where that 32% feel that IT investment in areas that don't support the business. They think that, again, now these coming from the CEOs, CFOs of the world, think that IT must better understand business goals, and that business goals are going unsupported by IT. So if the decision makers feel this way, then you're not going to get that seat at the table, right? So we got to start speaking the language of the decision makers, the CEOs, those and the council members in our particular case, those individuals that are creating or at least approving the budget. And again, this goes to show some of the dissatisfaction with where IT departments are failing to meet business stakeholder needs. And I put this slide in there really just to show that this is not just a city county problem, but this is industry wide. So we are fighting that uphill battle. But governance is not something that is going to be, that you're going to easily adopt it. It's a journey, it's a marathon, and you just got to run it, 1/4 mile at a time. I used to say 1 mile at a time, but I think it's more appropriate to say 1/4 mile at a time. So these slides were, again, these first few slides were designed to just show you or provide a foundation. Okay, so now I'll get a little more personal into the city's journey into governance. Okay. Any questions before I start from a foundational perspective?
We had one.
Okay.
Kevin Taylor said, can we get a sample agenda? And we had a second on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything that we have, I'm definitely willing to share. Absolutely, you can. Okay. So early on, as you can see, this slide represents the strategic plan for the city. Okay. So this is the 2031 vision. It's the city's mission, the core values, and the 2026 goals. Now, my team, all of their job results are aligned to either one of the city goals here or one of the IT goals which support the city goals. So there's an alignment there, okay? Now, this next slide shows how the IT department provides value up to and in support of the city's goals, okay? So as you see at the bottom, that we start at the bottom of our core values as it relates to professionalism and a commitment to excellence, teamwork, things of that nature. Talk about team character. We have our budget pillars. Those are the 4 pillars that I use in crafting our budget. We don't do I don't go through a zero-based budgeting exercise, but I do use these 4 pillars, which manage the resources, run the business, grow the business, and develop employees as a baseline for crafting my budget. Then the strategic pillars that you see there, those are our organization, our department goals, I should say, around easy to do business with, efficient and effective technology, balance in IT security, ones that we've added there, accessible broadband services, and maintain technically skilled and competent staff. Now, as you see, we continue to move into the business. So the strategic vision is forever was recognized as a world-class innovative city. That was a distinction that was placed on us. And now we're saying we are an essential part of that. We are an essential part. That meaning the IT department is an essential part of that world-class or that innovative city distinction. And at the very top there, you see the 6 goals and how we support that. So that is the blueprint, if you will, for how we have alignment. We also have about 10 or so performance indicators that we've looked at, and these are from FY20 actual to FY21 target. So we have key performance indicators. We also have a model. If you see it's kind of light right here, but you can see what says people, process, technology. My team hears me talk about that all the time. As we talk about smart city, I say we need smarter people, smarter processes, and smarter technology. So that's that business model. And then we also have another model that kind of walks us through infrastructure up through our GIS services and value-added services like CRM, application services, up to the point where we have this business vision of 24-hour city hall, meaning whatever our citizens can do at 2 p.m., we want them to be able to do at 2 a.m. if they so desire. One of the people on my leadership team, you guys probably know Derek Bowens, he's been around NCLGISA forever. He actually crafted this slide for me. And I thought it shows, the picture's worth 1,000 words. And these are all not blueprints, but all of the signs, if you will, of the operational department. So we have our fast transit system, development services. These are all the logos. That's the word that was escaping me there, Tabitha. All the logos of the respective departments. And then you see how our business model is keeping all of that in balance, right? So when I show this to the organization, again, it's designed to help them understand the operational impact that IT has on the overall city, okay? So as we're talking business here. We really haven't been talking a lot about the technology. We've been talking more about the business. So a couple of things. So we felt like when you look at this slide here and we talk about how we support the vision of the organization and we have all of these projects, right? And that we have an alignment and we have the prioritization that we thought wasn't there. Why is it that when we went back and we said, it's still not working, it's working better, okay? Governance is working better, but it's still not working as good as it could, as well as it could. And we were struggling with it. It was becoming more and more frustrating. Sometimes it was difficult to get the right people at the meetings, or we have all of these pop-up projects and things of that nature. Now, I just outlined where all the things that we thought we were doing, and we felt like we were doing them well, but it still wasn't making a difference, right? So when we went back and we talked to the Infotech group, they started asking us some questions. And the red items here, and again, like I said, this is our journey, right? These red items are the ones that we said, man, you know what? We resemble that. Those when we answer that question, if we answer that question truthfully, these are areas where we would have to say, yeah, we resemble that. These 4 areas that they talked about here, centered around inability to realize benefits, meaning does leadership understand the value proposition related to IT initiatives? The answer was, when we really started polling some of them, the answer was no. IT is regularly delegated, and some of you guys may see yourself in your organization in these questions as well. Statements. IT is regularly delegated unplanned projects. I'm sure if I could see all of you all raising your hand, you would be all I would venture to say 80% of you all are raising your hand that you're getting these pop-up projects throughout the year, even when you have a formal process upon which to, like us, to go through the TI, we call it the TIP process. There's no standard approach to prioritization of unplanned projects. We've been working on that. It hasn't been going as solid as I would like, but at least we have an approach. It's just that we got to work that plan better. Lack of benefits realization phase in projects. Again, the WIFM, what's in it for me, meaning what's in it for the organization. We got to be able to talk and talk in their terms. We talk about resource misallocation, wasted resources on duplication, projects. I mean, we are working on projects in some cases, especially around the public safety end sometimes, where they already have a project that we implemented 2 years ago, and now they're asking, another division is asking for a very similar project, and we'll start working on that. IT projects experience delays due to resource availability. And the key one there is that it's not always IT resources, but also we got to look at the organizational capacity as well. And I won't go through all of these, but as you can see, the ones that are in red, we resemble, right? So that's when we said, okay, yes, we're making headway. Yes, things are getting better, but we have a long way to go, and we're not realizing the benefits of governance that we really could and should.
Where did you get this information from as far as this framework that you're trying to decide if you fit into these or not?
We work with a company, Infotech, to assist us with that.
Infotech, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly. And so they have this whole redesign process that they're taking us through now. So this is our journey again, and we're probably about 30% into the journey. But as we implement some of these areas, as we've seen some benefits, and I think we'll continue to realize some benefits. And they actually have different tools and templates to assist us with aligning IT with the business context, assessing the framework. That's what we are right now, is assessing the current framework. And I'll get into some of those areas that we chose. And then we're going to go into a redesign and implementation. And it's not as iterative as it looks here. As we are working through some of those core areas, we are taking it all the way through the process without fully doing the assessment or fully going through all the redesign work. We were taking some of them through that entire process beforehand. Okay. And then some of the 5 areas that they kind of walked us through, and you'll see this in a minute, are centered around the governance of the portfolio and investments. And again, making sure that we have that our IT investments support and or enhance the organizational's return on investment. And again, talking about IT or talking about technology from a business perspective. Again, the other areas are centered around risk, services, and information and data. And that's one that we did focus on as well. All right, so with that, as you see here, it says back to the drawing board, right? So like I said, we thought we had things in alignment. We thought we were kicking the ball or moving the ball down the field. And again, we were, but there was still a lot of frustration. We were not as effective, I felt, as we could have been. And so when they brought up these 8 areas here that they asked, hey, which of these are important to you, Dwayne? Now, every organization, your respective departments or your respective organization may have a different mix. All right. When I say different mix of what you want to focus on first, the ones in green are the ones that we are focusing on first, meaning that I'm not suggesting that we are 100% in the vision, mission, and principles. I felt we were doing a better job with that. And some of our policies, the IT risk and things of that nature, I felt we were doing a better job on that. So the team selected like 4 of these areas to focus on, actually 5 with the vendor management there tangentially. 5 areas here to focus on around IT architecture, data governance, IT investments and prioritization, and then just overall IT services. Those are the 5 areas of vendor management. Those were the 4 or 5 areas that we said we want to go back and then go through this process here. So we're going to take those 5 areas that I said were lacking, okay, and we're going to use this framework that's on the screen now to walk us through that journey. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Are there questions? I want to pause. Tabitha, are there questions at this point?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So Jennifer Price wanted to know if you were involved as a CIO, were you involved in crafting the city's goals and vision?
The city's
Yes.
goals? Yes. As a member of the SLT, we meet on a yearly basis with our council for a strategic planning session. So we do have, and they bring an outside consultant in to help walk council through the goals. So my job there is really to ensure, so the way I set up is that we have our vision, mission, then we have goals, and then we have objectives. But the sweet spot for us are what we call targets for actions. So those are what council those are the activities that council would like for departments to focus on or accomplish in a 1-year time frame. Okay, so while the objectives pretty much remain the same, those targets for actions change on a yearly basis. Now, I don't pretend to say that they are very clear always. Those are clear targets for actions, and some cases they are very programmatic in nature, and then it's up to the directors to really figure out how we make those projects. Like one of the targets for actions this year for me, or the last 2 years, has just been smart city. Well, what does that really mean from what is it that you want me to do? So I got to figure out, what smart city activities.
I'm gonna stay here with the alcohol until you get that. Because
what smart city capacity, what smart city activities we're working on, and then use that language as we report back to them. So we are involved from a director level. We are involved in the makeup of those areas.
Awesome.
Other questions?
We just had someone comment, said, great that you were addressing unplanned items. You answered a question about where you got the questions from. That was Infotech. There was a question about the session being recorded, and it is being recorded, and they should be available after the conference closes. The board will have more information on that, but this session is being recorded. But that's all we have so far.
Okay, very well. All right, so we have the five areas there. Like I said, the architecture, and now what we did a drill down. Okay, we did a drill down of each of those respective areas. So as you can see, and the team has been, my leadership team, internal leadership team has been very intimately involved in this. We meet typically on a monthly basis to work through. I would like to do it quicker, but just with the number of other initiatives that we have, we just don't get to it. But we work on the outcomes. What is it that we want to do? What does success look like? Okay. And then what are those activities that's going to help us get to success? What are the current pain points, even with the current process, or even hurdles that we may see, even with some of the activities and outcomes, and then what's stopping us? And a lot of times it's going to really be centered around capacity. Okay. So the first one, again, was centered around IT investment and prioritization. We want to formalize the intake process, the triage process. And I know one of the, so in this particular case, we have a process map that shows how all projects come into the IT shop, or how break fix items come into the shop, tasks, whatever the case may be. Those 4 or 5 ways, I think, is what one of the CRMs created for us. He diagrammed the whole thing out. We all signed off on it, saying, okay, here are how projects coming in. Now, how do we turn that ask, if you will, into a formalized process? We're continuing to, like I said, it's a work in progress, and we're continuing to work that process. Now, the next outcome, again, demonstrating business value, ensuring that we're getting the benefits from the IT investment. And what are those, how do we continue to be agile in reprioritizing those initiatives and things of that nature? We need a governance body, not a recommendation. So a lot of times what you would find is that whatever I would bring to the table, they would just sign off on, or they would, prioritize those what I brought to the table. And one would say, well, what's wrong with that, Dwayne? Because, you're getting buy-in, but it's very tacit buy-in, if you will. It's not really buy-in as much as it's just an agreement. And what we're really looking for is skin in the game. What is the true buy-in? Getting where they are saying, here are the projects that are meaningful to the city from all aspects, not just technology led initiatives, but from construction initiatives. We have a huge uptick in construction initiatives that have an IT component, several IT components. We have development services with like city works projects and transit initiatives. So when you look at all of those projects, how do we protect not only the IT investment, but how do we determine what happens first? And then how do we process that? So what are the activities around that? So again, some of the things that we talked about was making sure that we establish a realization phase, a benefits realization phase on certain projects, as you see here. The dashboard is going to be extremely key in helping them understand not only where the projects are, but the capacity. I was showing Tabitha before the meeting, before the presentation here on a document. If we have time at the end, I'll show you that capacity planning document that is a work in progress. But again, all the managers are putting their resources in there. So again, we have some of the tools. It's just a matter of time, if you will, time to actually utilize it properly so that we can just, again, work the process and let the process work for us. Some of the pain points, again, lack of a triage process, appropriate level of planning for certain projects and things of that nature. So that was one area. The next area that we are focusing on is centered around IT architecture, right? What are the outcomes we want to pursue there? We looked at improving agility in response to business needs, maintaining a well-integrated framework, transparency and consistency and the technology decision-making. Now here we're talking about our back-end decision-making as it relates to server maintenance or our computer replacement plan and things of that nature. Support those operational areas. This is what we're talking about here as it relates to the IT architecture, some of the in-house activities that we want to make sure are properly prioritized and managed so that they understand how it supports the overall organization. Again, one of the other things that we have focused on one time from an ITIL standpoint, but no standard service catalog with defined IT services and products. Really, we had it at one time. No one was then maintaining it. So if no one's maintaining it, goes out of date. So in my opinion, we don't have it, right? That's the current pain point, right? Again, challenge of IT coming late to the table on business initiated technology initiatives. Again, this could go in pretty much every one of those respective areas there. And we talked about, again, aligning the TIP process, which is our technical improvement plan, which most of you all have probably heard of a CIP. We also have a TIP process here in the city of Fayetteville as well. So these are some of the outcomes and activities that we are working towards from an IT architecture standpoint as it relates to data governance. And this is hot off the press. I think we just finished this one Thursday. I think we just finished this one yesterday or Tuesday, I forget now, where we're talking about some of the outcomes is centered around consistency of data, who owns the data roles and responsibilities, things of that nature. Some of the activities are, again, establishing of the framework, education, making sure that we align the resources to keep it updated so that the departments don't feel like this is an IT initiative, if you will. And then again, making sure that we have the formal oversight of not just accountability, but the organization has, or the respective departments will have oversight of their respective areas. The next area is centered around IT services, right? And one of the ones that I put it in is developing service ownership and management culture. Resources are allocated to the right priorities. Again, that's a big one there. Making sure that we have clearly defined SLAs that not just cover some of the IT services, but all services, if you will. What are the activities that are going to support those? Again, all going to be centered around prioritization, establishing the SLA metrics, improving and publishing the service catalog. And the key thing about publishing the catalog is that it's going to make sure that we are held accountable, right? If we publish it, then we'll have a higher level of accountability around these activities. So these are some of the things, again, that we are working on to better improve our governance process so that we can have a better desired outcome. Let's see if there may have been one more. Yeah, vendor management. That's one of the other areas. I think that was the fifth and final area that we're focusing on there. Again, that's just kind of centered around the risk. When I selected this one, to improve on. It's really protecting the city from legal and regulatory risk, making sure that we provide and get the best value out of the an outcome. In some cases, we would just bring in a vendor, we would do our work up front, and then we just, kind of leave the keys with them. That's not always a good thing. Then we also want to focus on making sure that outcome is making sure that we are good stewards of the city's money, and from a cost management standpoint, and then just a better understanding of the overall procurement process. One of the things that we feel is that once we understand the process, it changes on us, right? So we are asking and working in conjunction with the finance and finance and procurement areas around, and budgeting areas around, documenting that process so that, again, it's on paper and it's a little more difficult to change once you kind of publish it, if you will. So we have some activities around that as well. And again, some of the current pain points are centered around, we were letting RFPs that were inconsistent. Even if it was construction, it was still inconsistent. And that was causing a lot of vendor lack of trust, if you will, from a vendor standpoint and the vendor community. So now just making sure that we can have a consistent RFP process is very key as well as an outcome here. So those were the 5 areas that we were focusing on. Some of the principles that we have adopted now is the committee needs to be viewed as a business committee, which determines IT investments based on business value. Like I said, we're not talking, we're trying to do less technology talk and more business talk. And the more we can do that, our user community are working with us to again, better determine the IT investments. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I mean, there's a lot of pushback in some cases around the process. And we talk about a project request form, and we're talking about business value. What does success look like, and capacity planning, all those things. It's not easy because they just want to call up like they normally do and say, hey, I need X, Y, Z project, and don't necessarily want to talk about, the business value of it. So that pushback has been needed. And luckily, we have had the commitment from our city manager's office. So that's been extremely beneficial in helping us move that down the road. Again, like I just mentioned city management, leadership, and that involvement is essential because you would have people, directors work around you. If not, if your leadership is speaking the same language, it's going to be extremely key in helping you move your governance priorities, if you will, down the road. Again, you want to make sure that it's not a bureaucratic process, that you still provide a level of business agility, that you don't hide behind the paperwork and the framework, that it's still about, at the end of the day, governance is all about relationship. So at the end of the day, you still got to make sure that you maintain that relationship. Yes, there's a process that we have to follow and a framework, but at the end of the day, it's still about maintaining that relationship, and you need to have that level of business agility and adaptiveness there. Being open to change, innovation, align with organizational values and the strategic plan. Again, I go in, I look at the departments, what is Transit's strategic plan? What are their strategic goals or business objectives? And then making sure that I tie in, I actually use my job results to tie into the organization. All the department directors tie into what their organizational goals are, so now they know that my success is basically aligned with their activities and their business goals, okay? So that's one thing that I do. Apply consistent protocols to review, acquire, utilize, and retire technology. And again, the key there, we always talk about how we are the process for acquiring and the utilization of technology, but we very rarely talk about how do we retire? How do we get rid of technology, in the proper way of doing that in a cost-effective manner as well. Total cost of ownership, not just looking at it from a CapEx, but obviously looking at things from a CapEx, OpEx perspective as well. to ensure that we have total cost of ownership. Again, we want to make sure that we have both transparency and visibility in our organization as well into the respective other departments as well. And again, that third from the last bullet there is that data is a key enterprise asset, and the data privacy is an essential governance element as well. So again, we're continuing to focus on data as an enterprise asset, and most departments, some departments don't understand that, but that's extremely key. That's a guiding principle as we talk through our governance, as we move forward with governance. That's a key principle for all departments. And then again, governance must reflect the city's risk tolerance. This is very key. If your governance is not in alignment with the culture, then it's never going to work. You got to make sure that your governance, if you have a relatively conservative organization, then on the bell curve, your governance process needs to lean in that direction. If not, because I think you've probably heard the term, a phrase, culture trumps strategy, right? So we have all these strategic areas, but if you don't understand the culture of your organization, all the things I just talked about goes out the window. So you got to make sure that the governance process and the governance and how it's, you got your framework, but you got to make sure that that process is in alignment with your organization's culture, okay? And then lastly, one of the things that as IT professionals, one of the things we don't do well, I'll be the first to admit, is the ability to say no, right? No is the second best answer. And some things, saying no is really a win for not just the department, but for the organization at large. And you got to have the ability to say no, okay? Again, some of the obstacles that we have encountered as it relates to the successful implementation of our governance process to date, again, is, some people look at it as just more overhead, that lack of value as it relates to IT. Again, it goes back to the order taking process, if you will, of not being responsive or inefficient, lack of resources, inconsistent messaging. So if you ask one member of IT, you get, hey, this is the process we use. If you ask another member, you're going to use this process. So those are all some of the obstacles that we are having to overcome. Again, you hear the term like organizations or departments' lack of planning creates this urgency for IT. And sometimes, being okay with saying we got to pause. We don't just need to go. Typically, what we find is that IT organizations across this country, when we're problem solvers. So when a problem is presented to us, the first thing we do is go into fix mode. And sometimes we have to go back and assess and pause and say, why is this happening? And get the organization to understand why things are happening. So these are all obstacles to successful implementation of a governance process. Again, ensuring that it's a business committee, not IT. The organization will at every turn try to steer you into, Dwayne, you tell us, or IT, you tell us what the projects are, we vote on them and keep it moving. They got to have much more skin in the game as it relates to the prioritization of these technology initiatives. And some of that is centered around making sure that they're properly educated. And I mentioned that in the third to the last bullet there, need effective education and communication plan, just a greater maturity and efficiency in IT processes. And then again, making sure that the organization understands that this is not a tool that is going to limit or that we hide behind, IT organizations hide behind as it relates to making decisions and things of that nature. So some of the next steps that we are focused, like I said, this is a journey for us. Some of the next steps that we're going to focus on, and I can present at another time, will be centered around there's a whole process now we're working with Infotech on as it relates to making sure, it says identify key stakeholders. We have the key stakeholders, so my activity working with them is going to be centered around making sure that I have the right stakeholders at the table, quite honestly, and then building that power map to prioritize what does that stakeholder alignment looks like, and then ultimately that's going to move into creating a technology investment council and then that's when we will begin to more formalize that particular process. So that's our journey to date. Like I said, we had a couple of false steps. We thought we were doing governance well based on what I showed you in those first few slides, but it was still it was still frustrating. It was still not giving us the value that we were looking for. So we went back to the drawing board, and this is the journey that we're on right now. So with that, that's the end of the presentation, unless I have questions. I'm definitely.
You have a few questions.
Okay.
One comment was, I like the RFP template idea with InfoSec requirements baked in. Another question is how has your IT department's organizational chart changed as a result of this effort? If so, can you tell us how it's changed?
How has the organization, the org chart changed?
For your department.
Okay. Well, early on, it hasn't changed with this latest iteration, but one of the things that we did early on was have an alignment of project managers to certain, like we have like a project manager that's aligned to public safety, that's aligned to what we call the, and when I was in Charlotte, we used to call it LUISA, Land Use and Environmental Services. But it's that kind of term here where like our development services engineering, we have project managers aligned to that. And then we have a project manager that's aligned to our internal services like CMO, finance, budget, HR, those areas. And then we don't have the full capacity to have a one-to-one with our CRMs, but I also brought in CRMs who are aligned with those areas as well. And then we have a support tier 2, tier 3 support that is aligned with those respective engineering or public safety PMs and so forth. And then the architecture group, the ITS, there's not an alignment there. They go across the entire organization. So that's how we have set up, if you will, the alignment of the org chart to meet the needs of the organization, so that you have a business understanding. Because the key there, the alignment is really designed to make sure that there's a business understanding before you try to implement a technology solution.
Awesome. So the next question is, any advice on getting reluctant city or county leadership on board with IT governance?
Well, that's a difficult question. Well, it's a multifaceted question, okay, or it's a multifaceted answer, I should say, in the sense that it starts with building the relationship. So you got to speak their language. Some may want you to. They got to understand that you care. First of all, they got to understand. So it may be going out to the airport and doing a tour of the airport, or doing a ride along with an inspector, or whatever the case may be, so that they understand that you understand their business and you understand the problems, or the problems, if you will, that and restrictions that are being placed on them, and maybe even how technology is a hindrance to them accomplishing their job. If the director doesn't think you understand that, then you will have a hard time reaching that person. Okay, but it's not a one size fit all. And I say multifaceted. You really got to understand what drives that person. What is it that helps? What do they hold sacred, if you will, in how they make decisions and things of that nature. So if you can get to helping having a better understanding of what drives them, what drives their organization, then I think you will have it would increase your opportunity to really reach them and bring them along. The other thing, like I said in the slide deck, you got to understand and be able to talk their language, meaning how does IT, how does technology help them meet their business goals or their job results? I've even worked with a couple of department directors where I looked at their job results and said, okay, now these are the things that's important to you. This is how IT can help you meet that particular job result with less work. There are reports, there, whatever the case may be. So is each one, like we have 17 departments or 16 departments, 17 departments including IT. So there are 16 different customized approaches, if you will, that I use to really help my to gain that business relationship, or to help garner or foster, I should say, a business relationship with my department directors.
Awesome. So another question is, would you be willing to share your organizational chart?
Yes.
And while you're doing that, another question was, how are you getting vendors to own project management on their end? Are you building templates for statement of work to force them to do their part?
And that's an ongoing process for me with the vendor and the project. But I insert myself, and in that, to me, my PMs understand that this is a co-managed project. It's not that we take the vendor's project schedule, task list, whatever the case may be, and just share that with others. What are our activities? So if you start adding to that, what are the activities that we provide? What are our capacity limitations and things of that nature? So I think you have to first set the tone that it's a co-managed activity. And once you do that, I think there's a high level of accountability for the vendors when it's co-managed. I'm not suggesting that it happens in every case. We could do a much better job of it, quite honestly. But the cases or the engagements, I should say, where we do that, I've found it to be much more fruitful outcome, fruitful outcome when we have that co-managed project plan. And I had mentioned that did somebody talk about capacity, Tabitha? Remember, I had mentioned that capacity document.
You mentioned that capacity document, which was very interesting when you first showed it to me.
Do we have time, or?
Yes, we do. We do not end until 4:45.
Okay. So like I said, now this is, and they're probably going to, shoot me for even sharing it, because like I said, it hasn't been updated. We're actually using the month of May and June to close out our fourth quarter activities, and then this is the planning for FY22. But again, this is, we outline so up here at the top, and one of the CRMs, Ulysses Crawford, he actually created this for us, and it's where you have all the staff across the top here, okay, and you can see that across the top. And we start out with 2,080 hours, and then we take out vacation, sick, and all that good stuff. But the key is making sure that from a planning standpoint, we have our operational task in here, okay? And once we have our operational task in here, what are those areas that are mandated by council and management? Then you see TIPs and pop-up projects and things of that nature. So we have all of those listed, and then we have them categorized by quarter. And now, I'm not going to pretend that some of these don't change. We don't, slide or whatever the case may be. But this is the planning that takes place. Okay, so we then have the outline by first quarter, and then we draw down the capacity. So I use this document a lot of times just to show a department director that is, how you have some of those department directors that think you're just working solely for them. So this shows organizationally what my guys are up against, right? It shows, so when you start seeing minus 45%, look, minus 221%, when we put everything in there, we're like, okay, now this creates I should say, the governance piece for you. This creates that where you say, okay, if you're not giving me the priority, if you're not prioritizing these projects, then the likelihood of us getting to one of your projects by the time we get to the fourth quarter is very unlikely. It's highly unlikely. So a lot of times when I show them this document, it really helps them to understand the need for the planning and the staying on track. Once we start a project, that they have their people on deck to ensure that we can hit our targets. So I use this project capacity planning documents a lot of times just to show from an organizational standpoint, the need for governance. That's how I use this particular document, even when it's not completely filled out. Like right now, like I said, we got a lot of work to do on it, but the template still, the document still is doing what I need for it to do. And we also talk about our pop-up projects that we have listed here. These are all the pop-up projects that have come up in the last, well, this is the last year's submissions, if you will, and the amount of projected hours that we're looking at. And then before we move it to this first tab, there's a conversation. We go through a new project request conversation before we move it to this resource capacity planning tab here, where we're actively working on it. So once I show them how the number of pop-up projects that we have coupled with the projects that were already planned, that kind of helps them see the full scope of what we're working with.
Good gracious. Okay, I think
Was
we
there a
have,
question, or I thought I heard someone say it was a question.
we have one last question that I see.
Okay.
It says, do you separate staff for business analysis to develop IT project requirements?
No. I do not.
Okay, and the question was asked again, can you display your organizational chart?
Oh, right. Oh, I can, who wants it? I can send it to them.
Jacqueline Phillips Hayes.
You said Hayes?
Yes, Hayes. I'll copy
If we can get that address in the chat, I'll then
it
we'll
is
get that over to them.
there. It is Jacqueline P at cityofws.org.
It's in the chat if you need it.
Okay.
I can also send you a message, a private message through our profiles in NCLGISA.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate your, if there are no other questions, Tabitha, I appreciate your time and attention.
I only have two more questions. What are your top three? It said, what are Dwayne's top three, and how much time does it take to keep this spreadsheet up to date?
Well, well, yeah, it's interesting you said top three because from a leadership standpoint, every director has to report out on their top three projects. So right now, my top three are, we're right in the midst of the throes of an ERP project. So we're, ERP is number one. We have a domain Office 365, a domain migration Office 365 project, that's number two. And then our timekeeping system that we implemented for the city, but not for fire and police. So now we are working to implement an automated timekeeping system for fire and police. That has been a heavy lift as well. So those are my top three. Those are my top three projects right now. And as far as keeping the spreadsheet up to date, my respective managers are in conjunction with my one of the CRMs work to keep this up to date. We can do a much better job than we are, but we will do a much better job than we have been. But we do a good job on the initial planning, if you will. But as far as by the time we get to about the third quarter, we don't necessarily do the proper movement, but we put some processes in place to ensure that that happens as well. So I've kind of inserted myself in that process as well. So that's going to help out quite a bit.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So before we close out, I want to tell you about our gold sponsor. And there are a few emails in the chat, Dwayne. I'll try to copy those out for you. Okay. So our gold sponsor is Zentegra. Zentegra was created by former Citrus employees who wanted to create a better partner focused on customer enablement and education. We are a consultancy and retailer hyper-focused on the full end-user computer and all of its complementary products. That's all we have, and everybody says great presentation and thank you.
Hey, Tabitha,
Yes.
this is Marcus with the city of Fayetteville. I've got those emails going to Dwayne's mailbox right now.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Marcus is the man. Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, that's great. Because I was going to say, I just copied the chat. I just copied the entire chat so he can refer to it later if he needs to.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.